Okay, what we're going to learn today is how to use Multisim just to lay out a very simple circuit, simulate it, and make a simple measurement. So in this particular case, I have Multisim version 11 open, and what I'm going to do is come to File and tell it that I want a new file and I want a new design. And now what you're going to see Multisim do is it's going to open up this schematic background. And within my overall folder design 1, I have this particular layout that I'm going to be looking at. So in order to lay out a simple circuit, the first thing we need to do is on this schematic background we need to place parts. So let's come over here to place, and we're going to ask it to place a component. And now what it's going to do is bring up this dialog box, and within this dialog box are all different kinds of components. I'm going to choose power sources. And you see within power sources I have a number of different types of power sources. If I choose DC power, it's going to give me a DC voltage source option. So I'm going to tell it OK. And once I tell it OK, this becomes a live movable part that I can place on the schematic. So I'm just going to place it here. Now at this point you notice the dialog box comes back up. If I select OK again, it's going to give me another voltage source to place on the schematic, and that's not really what I want. So I have two options. One is I can close this dialog box, in which case it just brings my schematic up. And now we can look at the part that we just placed. So within Multisim, a couple of things happen here. First, the part is given a name. It's going to default to the subscript 1, so this is V1 for voltage source 1. And it's given a value, and there are some default values. You can either change those as you place the part, or you can change them after you place the part by double-clicking. You'll see now that we have this dialog box open. I can come in now and I can change this voltage, really make it whatever I want to make it. We'll just change it to 10 volts. Okay, now I want to put in a couple of resistors. So let's go back and place another component. And sometimes you have to sort of hunt for what you're looking for. Most simple resistors, capacitors, basic circuit elements can be found under Basic inside the master database. So I'll select a resistor here. And let's go ahead and make it a, notice the values that I can assign. Let's go ahead and make it a 1K resistor. And I'll place that on the schematic. And now let's select another resistor. Let's make it a 2K. And I'll place that on the circuit diagram as well. And you notice that they've reflected the values that I assigned them. So now I want to close this. Now what I'd like to do is connect the elements together in this circuit, but I want to make it look prettier. So you have several options here. You can right click, and when you right click you have the option to rotate the element. So we'll just do that. So we'll come here and right click on R2. We'll rotate it as well. Now one of the nice things about Multisim is it's smart, so it realizes what you want to do really before even you want to do it, and it'll change your tool from the select tool to the wiring tool based on what you're in the vicinity of and what you're trying to do. So as I move closer to this into this voltage source, notice that the tool changes, and I can now connect the voltage source and the resistor together. So that's just a simple matter of running the cursor while holding the left mouse button between the two ends, and then when you reach the other end, another left mouse click will place the wire. So now I have my circuit hooked up. I have the two components selected. I now think it would be interesting to use this to illustrate the voltage divider rule. So I'd like to measure the voltage across the 1K resistor and across the 2K resistor and see if indeed our circuit's going to follow the voltage divider rule Before I can actually simulate anything on Multisim, I need to insert a ground. So we will come and place a component, and interestingly enough, the ground is not where you would think it would be. It actually turns out it's in sources. So here's us a ground. So we're going to just place the ground, and in this case we're just going to connect the ground to the negative terminal of the DC voltage source. And Multisim will automatically make that connection with the left mouse click, and notice that it puts the node in here to illustrate that yes, indeed, you have made a connection there. Okay, now I would like to simulate this, and I need an instrument so that I can make a measurement. So since this is a DC circuit, you can see all the instruments I have to choose from. Since this is a DC circuit, we'll choose the multimeter. So we'll just insert the multimeter here, and now I'll hook the multimeter up across R1. Oops. Sometimes it's too smart. So now I have the multimeter hooked up where I'm going to measure the voltage across R1, across the 1K resistor. And if you double click on the multimeter, it brings up the display. And notice that I have volts selected and I have DC volts selected. The little curvy line would be for AC. So if you come up here to the top, the toolbar up at the top, notice that I have the option to run. So when I click that, what that does is that runs the circuit, meaning that effectively it applies the voltage across this resistor sequence. And you can see now that after a second or two, the multimeter now shows that it's reading 3.33 volts across this resistor. If I want to reconfigure anything, it's always a good idea to stop the simulation. I can now come and grab this particular, sometimes it places a wire when you don't want it to place a wire, so you can just delete that. I can come with a right click of the mouse and delete this wire as well, and now I can just move that terminal over to the other side of the 2K resistor. Now let's run this simulation, and notice that it's minus 6.67 volts. Why is it negative? Because I switched the positive terminal of my multimeter to the grounded end of the 2K resistor, the more negative voltage. So it's going to show me having a negative voltage. I could switch these two wires connected to the multimeter and it would show me a positive voltage of 6.67 volts across this resistor. Now if you recall, when we measured the voltage across R1 we got 3.33. If we look across R2 we get 6.67. Neglecting the fact that we switched our positive and negative polarity on our multimeter, that would add up to a total of 10 volts, which is the total voltage placed across the two resistors. So this is just a very simple example of how one can set up a circuit in Multisim, a DC circuit, and then make various measurements within the software.